In the past decade, you've directed superhero movies, murder mysteries, international spy flicks, and now you've settled onto Artemis Fowl. What was the draw to Artemis Fowl for you? And were you a fan of the books?
I was not familiar with the books, but I was in the middle of post-production on Disney's Cinderella, and I was really enjoying what became, at least in this sort of interior sense of experiencing it, this coming-of-age story for a young woman where a different kind of empowerment was possible inside a story where traditionally you might say that this character was a victim, and trying to find that way to have fidelity to the original fairy tale and yet present somebody empowered in this new story. I found that in a popular form, because you try and make an entertaining movie, not kind of make some big statement, but tell that story subtly. I found it fascinating, and there I was doing it for the life of a young woman, a coming of age story for a woman. And when Artemis Fowl came up, it felt very much like a twin story where I could try and look at the same kind of trajectory for the coming of age for a young man. And as my nephews were reading the book at that very time, they told me I had to do it.
Now, somebody that stole every scene that they were in for me was Fredia Shaw.
Yeah.
Amazing performer. Where did you find Fredia?
It's just so I'm clear. So Fredia Shaw played Artemis Fowl, and Lara McDonald played Holly Short. So we're talking about Fredia, who plays Artemis, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So we went around the globe, and we knew we had to find somebody who, whether they were or weren't, could give us the authentic Irish thing. It was tough for kids from America, Australia, Canada. The accent was difficult. He came in, he had the natural accent, the gift of the gab, as my mother would say, so the Irish charm. And he had a capacity for sort of self-deprecation. He was funny. And through the whole 9 months of tests, really to discover, could he do the physical stuff? Did he freeze up in front of a camera? Was he intimidated by the big business of a large scale movie? It's a tough ask, isn't it? 12-year-old kid, please come and star in a massive Disney movie. Some people would be thrown. And while he wasn't dismissive of the, the whole thing, he was able to sort of, he's his own guy. He's a vegan. He's very strongly, his own guy in that way. And so he was a total enthusiast about the books. He knew all of them very well. So he was passionate, and he was good fun and good company. And he asked a ton of questions. So just as we knew that the character of Artemis Fowl hoped to reveal itself in this film, in Fredia itself, you sensed that a really kind of big intelligence, big heart, big sort of, individual was emerging before our very eyes. It was going to be great to catch.
Now, obviously this is from a book series. Now, how do you pick and choose what you want to adapt and what works for film and what should stay in the books, for the best film you can make?
Because this was an origin story, I felt that we wanted to go back to the source. So the first book, and to use the structural shape, Owen used to refer to it in the early days as the first book. They said, "What is it about?" He said it was Die Hard with fairies. Right. So indicating that there was a siege structure. Eventually, the main characters will all get wrapped up in a place that was under threat, from within and from without. So I wanted to keep that, felt that dramatically it was strong. It was the right way to tell the beginnings of the story, but I wanted an emotional backbone. And so I chose to take that from the second book, which is Artemis Fowl and the Arctic incident, where his father is kidnapped. And I wanted to put that kidnap in the middle of that first story for it to be the drive that creates the emotional trajectory for Artemis, so that in this curious thing one was trying to do is find a way for a new audience to connect to someone who's the lead in the film. So to some extent, needs to be empathetic or even heroic. But of course, in the DNA of the book, he's going to have to end up anti-heroic, right? Because he's a criminal mastermind. And our kind of, the character arc that inspired us was Michael Corleone in The Godfather, somebody who is introduced to the family business from a relatively normal outsider status, surprised, amazed, required to do things he's never done before, and then decide whether he likes it or not, and whether he's going to stay as as the new boss. So that trajectory for Artemis felt like a strong one, and that would send him out potentially into other adventures to be as dark or as, you know, light as we felt the audience started to be compelled by.
Now, Artemis Fowl was one of the films that were caught up into this pandemic crosshairs, and it moved to Disney Plus. What kind of freedoms does that provide when you're going to a streaming service? Obviously, the film's done, but does that provide you a little bit more freedom with the marketing, whatever it may be?
I think, to be honest, I'm still discovering that. What we knew was the pandemic was making an extraordinary time for these streaming services, including Disney Plus, and I knew that from the moment we were in this massive queue of films that were going to try and find a place in an overcrowded movie release schedule once the pandemic is lifted, and then what size can the audiences be if we are socially distanced, etc. That's a long queue to get into. When Disney Plus said, look, you made this movie for families, we've got a world full of them sitting in their own front room, and the idea of a big tentpole entertainment coming their way this summer would be a big thrill. So, you know, we made this for an audience, and we were so glad to be somewhere where we were welcomed as much as this. And I haven't noticed much difference, except, you know, here I am. I might be sitting in a real room with you, right, in normal circumstances. But aside from these curious, miraculous communications, I do feel as though there's been a sort of a kind of freedom about the way it's been marketed that's been positive. Yeah.
Now, the Artemis Fowl world is something you're bringing to the big screen. Is it something that you want to see out in further sequels to really helm that Artemis Fowl kind of universe?
Well, you know, there are another 6 3/4 books that Owen wrote, full of the most amazing character development and adventures. Inevitably, as you might imagine, in some of those, Artemis goes underground. I'd pay to see Artemis Fowl down in Haven City. For me, that would be a ticket for me. The audience will decide, of course. You know, in origin story, it's always difficult to know whether you'll please some, you'll enrage others. And I've been down this road before with pictures like Thor, right. And so you know, the audience decides whether enough of what they love is there, providing, you know, more space for passionate debate across the wires. And I hope so, because I think there's great material and there's some great performance involved.
Now that Artemis Fowl is going to be on Disney Plus, does that open the doors or open your eyes a little bit to maybe possibly converting future sequels into series, or have you not thought that far ahead with what's going on?
Certainly can't think that far ahead with what's going on, but also you can't assume what the audience is going to like. You always just put your eggs in the basket that you have the privilege to have, which is this one. The world is our oyster beyond this creatively, if the audience turn out to like it, you know, and the form it takes, again, that's a sort of open book. I'd be fascinated, of course, to see the reaction, but anything's possible. And the creative desire to, you know, follow through on this, you know, we put a lot of emotional and creative investment into it. I hope it continues.
I know that you're going to be in Tenet, and I'm extremely excited for that film as well. And a lot of people are already calling it like the savior of the movie industry for tons of different reasons. From what you guys created in Tenet, do you think that obviously that's a lot of pressure, but do you think it's one of those films that it's bringing back everybody to theaters?
What I know is that personally, I would love to be back watching movies in cinemas. And if I was coming back, I'd love to come back to something that really, really deserved to be in the cinema. Well, Tenet deserves to be in the cinema. Many people will know Chris Nolan's work, and all the way through from The Following, from Memento, Interstellar, Inception. This movie is in that tradition of that band of his films. So it's a real beautiful, entertaining, blockbustery Rubik's Cube. It lives for cinema, and in cinema, it feels like it's one of those ones that will just demand repeat business. You'll want to go back as many times as I went back to the script. And it's a great big swing at the fences by Chris Nolan. He's called it his most ambitious film yet. I think that's true. And I think that that's something that if you're returning to the cinema, you want to celebrate. You don't want to go back and see something that feels normal. Tenet is pretty extraordinary. Whether it saves the film industry or not, the theatrical part of it, it certainly, I think, is well worth the audience's attention.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This movie was amazing. I can't wait for everyone to see it. And I can't wait to see what happens in the future for the Artemis Fowl universe. I appreciate your time. I think you're one of the best directors out there. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Very kind of you. Thank you very much. Sorry I was a bit late, but it's great talking to you.